Hello, Music Theory 2. Here we are at the top of Chapter 8. So we're finally getting into triads and first inversion. Chapter 6 dealt with root position triads. Chapter 7 dealt a little bit with harmonic progression. And we've gotten through all of that. And now we can start getting into some more interesting textures that involve some different inversions and particularly some different bass lines. So I always like to look at this introduction. This is right at the top of Chapter 8. And we'll do a little bit of an overview in this one and then get to some analysis. And then I'll do one more video that'll involve more part writing. So let's listen to this analysis first here. This is Haydn, and I like to play this one because it exemplifies the importance of first inversion triads. So here we go. This is in D major. So listen to that one more time. Now notice all of these chords are in root position, and also notice that this is not what Haydn wrote, right? This is just kind of an example of what it would sound like if all of our chords were in root position, right? It's fine, it's good enough, but let's imagine now that this very same passage, instead of being written all in root position, now was written with some inversions. Listen to the bass line. I would argue that the bass line is much more interesting now, and the texture is also much more interesting. We've offered some variety in our bass line, but we've also offered some variety in our interaction between the melodic line and the bass line. Right? So, obviously, it's much better to have inversions, not only for the sake of harmonic interest, but also so our basses can have a beautifully melodic line throughout, and so that our counterpoint can be maximized. And that counterpoint is the interaction between our main melody line, you could say, and our bass line, or really any one of our melodic lines going through. So one example of first inversion triads that occurs quite often is this sort of bass arpeggiation and really differentiation and keeping of melodic line in our bass. So let's listen to this quick example. So we can see here, if we had to jump all the way down to a root position 5 chord, here it would make quite a jump, but instead we get this nice smooth line, and we can sing that together. This is do, 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 ti, do, 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 as opposed to do, 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 so, do. Right, much smoother. Again, bass arpeggiation is one very typical use of first inversion triads. Here's another one. Sorry. One more time. To textual reduction. Good melodic line in the bass. Right. So again, helping to smooth out the texture, right? Okay, and again, they're going to use all sorts of reductions, and that's what this is, basically simplifying it to whole notes. We're chunking out those notes so we can see just what's going on in our bass. So some main reasons to use first inversion triads, as you can see here, to improve the contour of the bass line, so we're not so leapy, as I like to put it, more stepwise, more melodic. 2, to provide greater variety of pitches in the bass line, right? And then 3, what's most important, what we just saw, is to lessen the weight of 5 and 1 chords that do not serve as harmonic goals of harmonic motion. Now let's remember something. Remember our diagram that we studied in Chapter 7. We said 5 going to 1. This is our most important progression, right? It's the DNA of any key. It's really, these are pillar chords. This is what I would call it. Now, if we take 5 out of root position, even this, let's say 6-4, or any inversion in 7th chords, by doing this, it weakens this harmony, right? When it's not in root position, we don't have 5-1, so, do, right? So it weakens the strength of our 5 chord. And so these chords can be used within a harmonic progression without being sort of these pillar chords without being chords that are serving a particular harmonic goal. And, specifically, we're talking about cadences, things that happen at the ends of phrases. So this variety in inversion offers us a variety in the weight or the degree which we can strengthen or weaken a particular harmony, a predominant, dominant, or tonic harmony. Good, so one example of this, and this is more, we're talking more background harmony. We're looking at the pillar harmonies here. Let's look at this particular example. Sorry. One more time. Right, so what do they do here? Well, we're actually showing the chords through here, right? We're actually showing what chords are being used. Zoop, through there. But then down here, basically what we're saying is we are prolonging one, and this is an important term, prolong. We are prolonging one through embellishment by these chords here. So one is really our pillar harmony, and these harmonies right here are being served or used to embellish our tonic. Notice they happen on weaker beats. Both of the 5 chords happen on weaker beats, 2 and 4. And our beat 3 is on 6, which is closely related to 1. And so 1 is happening on strong beats. And then finally we get a 5 happening on a strong beat. And this is going to serve as a pillar harmony here. So these chords right here are being used to prolong 1. Now, this is an interesting idea because I think we've been kind of in the mindset of each chord gets an equal amount of weight. I would say no. Most of the time we have pillar harmonies, harmonies that are being embellished or prolonged using other harmonies and other inversions. Typically, we can find this based on duration, based on inversion, based on landing on strong or weak beats. So this is an important idea, and we'll be doing more of this as we go forward into our analysis. Okay, and then they talk a little bit about 6-chord and first inversion and say, don't do that. It's really much better not to use this in a deceptive progression because it sounds like a funky 1 chord, and I'll give you an example of that. So here we go. 2, 5. Now, really, our bass progression sounds like we should be going to 1, right? So when this chord is in first inversion, it sounds like we're going so, do. But in fact, we're not. We're going to a 6th chord, right? And so we generally don't want to do that. We want to stay in a root position 6 if we're going to use a deceptive cadence. Right? So that would be the correct way of writing it, not in first inversion. So we can also have a succession of first inversion triads. Well, here's a good example of 6-6 in first inversion there. You can look at that too. Inversion lead seat symbols. So this is something important to look at. We've already talked about slash chords in the book. Typically, lead sheets will use some sort of slash. And then A minor flat 5. Ooh, this is like a diminished chord here. So typically inversions and lead sheets use slash symbols or slash chords as we used in fundamentals. One other thing to think about is parallel 6th chords. This is derived from a Renaissance technique called Faubourg, but oftentimes you'll get a sequence of falling first inversion triads. So here's a C chord in root position. Here it is in first inversion, a 6 chord, 1 6 chord for in C major, and parallel 6 would sound something like this. Very nice sound because it's parallel 6 in those first inversion triads. Here's an example of a Haydn symphony doing something similar.
Example 8, 9.
So it's a nice effect, I think, and you can hear the textural reduction down here. 5 6 5 1. Oops, I'm sorry. Right, that nice falling first inversion. It's a really beautiful technique. Good, and you can see another example of it right here, or we might have falling fifths or falling first inversion triads. And this is a sequence of basically, we can say, parallel first inversion triads. This is considered a type of sequence here. And you can see in B, we have some voice leading that helps us kind of get through this without a lot of errors, helping to avoid those parallel fifths here. So we kind of go in, and then we go out a little bit more, and then we go in to avoid some of our parallels in four-part textures. Remember, parallel fourths are okay, as you can see in this example. Parallel fifths are not. Okay, so I'll skip over part writing for right now, and we're going to go and do some analysis. I'll do part writing in the next part of the video. Let's do some quick analysis. I'm going to jump over to our self-test, and this is on page 126, 127 in your textbook. And I'm going to skip over the analysis. This is a little too long for us. We're going to look at this Bach chorale first. And we're here in the key of A major. I'm just going to go through a quick analysis of it. Let me play it first. There on a 5 chord. I'll play that one more time. Just a little passing tone in there. Okay, good. So we're in A major here, and we definitely, as you can hear, please remember to write your key in. Some of you are forgetting to do this in your assignments. Please write your key in. And as you can see, we have a 1 chord here, and as we flesh this out, we see D, F sharp, A, and you can see F sharp is your lowest note. This is a 4/6 chord. I'm not liking the green. It's a little too light for me. 4/6. And then again here, we see another chord that looks like it's in first inversion. This chord written out is C sharp, E, and G sharp. So what is this chord? C sharp, E, and G sharp. This would be a 3 chord in root position, excuse me. Yes, sorry. I don't know why that took me so long. And then we have a 6 chord here in root position. Yes, but we have one extra note in here. We have F sharp, A, C sharp, and E. So this is a 4/7 chord. I think we can safely say that. It's a really quite a nice chord. Okay, moving on. Now, anytime you have something with parentheses around it, this is really just going to tell you that this is a non-chord tone. And so we want to ignore it for right now. We will get to non-chord tones a little later this semester. So we're just going to count the notes G sharp, B, and D for this chord. And this is a 7 diminished chord in first inversion. And as I said before, 7 chords will usually be in first inversion. Here's another 1 chord, and this is in first inversion too. So this succession, 7 diminished 6, 1, 6. Notice we're going in opposite motion to the bass, right? Root motion of a second. And then finally, we land on a 5 chord here. And as we'll see down the line, this is called a half cadence. And that's really, it's the question mark cadence, if you will. It's incomplete. It ends on a 5 chord. We want things to end on 1. Or we expect things to end on 1. Let's keep going. 1, and then we get that 4/6 chord again. And then what happens here? Now we're going to get E, G sharp, and B. And again, we have our third as the bottom note, and so we think 6, or first inversion. This is a 5/6 chord. And then if we dig through all of our non-chord tones here, this one, this one, this one, and this one, we'll see in this chord that we have on this beat, our E is kept through, so we have A, C sharp, and E. Notice the duration of this note, right? It's a dotted quarter note, so it's going to hold all the way through. So we'll consider this a 1 chord. And then this chord right here is B, D, F sharp, and A. And notice that D is our lowest note. This is a 2 minor 6/5 chord. And this is a 5 chord and 1, and this is what we call a perfect authentic cadence. And we'll study that later. It's a 5-1 chord where we're in root position and that tonic pitch has to be the highest note. So there you go. 1, 4, 3, 6, 7. Quite a nice chord. I like that. 7 diminished 6, 1, 6, 5, 5. Right, and so if I played all those in root position, it would sound something like this. Doesn't sound nearly as good, right? So those inversions really work wonders, making our bass much more melodic. Okay, moving on. 1, back to our 4/6 chord. 5. And of course, we have our 2, minor 2/6/5. This is a very, very typical progression here. And notice the solfege here we hear a lot. Fa, so, do, right? Fa, so, do. Very, very typical. We want to look for these when we're looking for cadences. It's a very, very typical progression. Okay, the bass line. Nice little bass line there, and it's enabled a little bit by our inversions. Notice that this first part's a little leapy, right? But it's arpeggiating an F sharp minor chord, so remember that leapiness is going to be okay. All right, let's just do one more, a Beethoven example right here. And I like this example. This is Beethoven's first piano sonata. So good. We have a lot of first inversion triads here. This is in the key of F minor. Don't forget to put that. Notice we have a lot of E naturals hanging out in here. That should be a big hint that this is not in A flat major, right? It's not a major key. We have an E natural, which is our leading tone in the key of F minor, right? So that's a big hint as you're going through this sort of stuff. Okay, so all of this is essentially a minor 1 chord. And we see our minor 1 chord here, F, A flat, C. But then when we get to the second measure, we see this chord, which is C, E natural, G, and B flat. And this is a 5/7 chord, but again, we're in first inversion. Yes? Much better than... It sounds a little childish to do that, not very melodic. And then, of course, we head back to 1 here. And then we go back to that to another inversion here. And in this chord, we see E natural, we see G, and we see B flat. Now this chord is a 7 diminished 6 chord. And notice we continue with another couple of first inversion triads here. What do we have? Well, this is a 1/6. And then what is this chord right here? This chord's a little different, right? What is this chord right here? This is G, B flat, and D flat. This is a diminished chord, but it's based on 2. Remember, in minor keys, 2 is diminished. And here, what do we see? We see our Fa, So there in the bass. If you're oriented in F minor, Fa is B flat, and So is C. Right? And so we get our Fa, So, but we don't get our Do, right? And again, this is a half cadence. We end on 5. It's a question mark cadence. It leaves us hanging, right? Wanting more. Let's look at the full bass line here. It's kind of interesting. F, E natural, F, G natural, A flat, B flat, C. So we're just traveling E natural, F, G, A flat, B flat, C. So actually the bass line stays fairly compact within 5 notes, right? Allowing our melodic line to travel up these large arpeggiations. So it kind of gives the foundation for what the melodic line is doing, or for what our motivic line is doing. Right? right? So it smooths things out. It's quite nice here. So lots of inversions. Here's a series of first inversion triads at the end here. So good. I think this will be interesting doing some more analysis here. I'll leave it at that. The next video will be about